So something that's very fucking serious. And I'm just kidding. So something I learned about recently that was really like mind blowing, like eyes shattering, mind blowing, like ball rocking was. I was watching this channel. It's called holy fuck, I forgot the name. I'm gonna put it up on the screen. Objective personality, right? And you know how I'm very much into my Carl Jung cognitive functions and stuff of that nature. And they were talking about how actually what we're weak at, we tend to, and the word they used was peacock. The example they used was this guy called Gary Vee. And basically he talks a lot about like self-awareness and like not giving a fuck and stuff like that. And they were basically saying it's because he actually, on the regular, like at his like normal state, he gives a lot of fuck about other people. Like I think, he's very people orientated, so what people think of him actually does affect him. So he's needed to train himself into not giving a fuck. Switching from like extroverted feeling into more introverted feeling, if you want to use, cognitive function speak. And that really blew my mind, because like oftentimes what you're good at, you don't really show off. It's like it comes second nature to you, and it's not something that you almost take it for granted. So it's not something you really want to put out there, but it's when it's something that you're weak at and you get good at it. It's like knowing that you're weak at it, but then you become good at it. It makes you feel like you've had this like tremendous journey in which you got good at something, and then it feels like, oh, this is something really worthwhile for me to tell people. I talk a lot about like I suppose being in the present moment and not giving a fuck about what other people think, knowing what you want, instead of living based on other people's standards or society standards. And well, I realized, and this was like mind shattering for me, it's because I'm really weak in those areas in terms of like I'm not giving a fuck. It's like I talk about not giving a fuck and just doing what you want is because I think in my past so often I've done what other people wanted or what other people expected of me, or I've done things, more for an external sake rather than an internal value. And I've always felt like I've overdone it. I've like way stepped over onto that side of the spectrum, and I've just like overextended myself and I hurt myself and it feels like shit. So it's like, no, fuck that shit. Boom, pull it back to this side. No, do what you want. Like, what the fuck do you want? Right? So then a lot of times what I talk about is being more in your own power instead of giving it out to others. You don't hear me talk about like, oh, how you can be more kind or how you can be more give more service to other people. Like, not that it's not important, of course it is. It's like by default that's how I operate. But it gets to a point where it goes out of balance, and I do it too much, and I it takes too much out of me. So then I talk about caring more about yourself and doing things that are truly aligned with you, rather than treating how you live your life based on other people's expectations of you. Ultimately, it's a balance. It's like you don't want to be too much inside your internal feelings, where you're just like, no, I only want to do what I want, and I'm selfish and I'm entitled and I don't give a shit at all about what other people want of me. And I think some people have found great success doing that, not necessarily saying it's the best way, but it's not the worst way either. For example, Steve Jobs, I think he was a very much like bit of a shit boss, like very like a tyrannical boss, very domineering. Same with Elon Musk is what I hear, and he just works people to the ground because he's like, well, I have this vision, this is what I want, you better do what I want, otherwise get the fuck out, right? That's very much their energy. But then on the other side, it's like you become like a people pleaser, you become needy, you're completely doing things for the sake of pleasing other people, and that over time is just going to take all of your energy out. And I think this is especially important for empaths and like intuitives and stuff, where they really get attracted to people that like maybe are more in their own world and they need help. So then it's like there's that whole relationship with like narcissists and empaths, and how they kind of there's this dance that they do. And well, ultimately you don't want to be a narcissist, but you don't want to be an overly you don't want to be an empath with no boundaries. Like, you want to be somewhere in the middle, ideally. Like, maybe 51% of the time you're doing what it is that truly aligns with you. Like, at the very least, you have your ground, you have your backbone, you have your stability, you have your earth. And then 49% of the time, you go out there and you really serve people, you really care about what other people want and what they need, and try and serve them. And I think if we can get into this beautiful balance, then that would be ideal. So to extend this concept more into your everyday life, you can really notice it in people, like what they post about, what they really talk about, or what they tend to brag about or boast about, right? That's actually what they're most likely weak at, you know. So to give you an example, I had this friend that I always felt like was a bit of a princess, bit self-centered, and she, you know, always talked a lot, um, and it was kind of annoying, right? And then one time she was like talking to me in her own kind of spiel, like giving her a kind of like PR campaign to me. She was like, "Oh, I'm such a supportive friend. I always help out friends and da 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 da." And I'm like, sure, I can see that sometimes, but most of the times I feel like if anything, you're way more obsessed with yourself and self-absorbed than actually putting that energy onto other people. For a long time, I felt guilty for thinking this way in case I was being mean or something, and not giving her the benefit of the doubt. But over time, I really realized my intuition was right. It's like, no, she's just saying all that shit because it looks good. And it kind of puts on this facade of like, I'm such a good friend, even though deep down she's way more interested in herself. Not to say that's necessarily wrong, than in others. And you know, there's that whole quote, it's like, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And I think that's particularly pertinent with, you know, this video. When you talk to people, you know, when you interact with people, don't just don't just kind of buy their shit, you know. Like, they might try and sell you like, oh, this is me, I'm da 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 da. Like, what do they actually do? What is their life actually about? So again, I think coming back into your own life, think about the times when you've kind of tried to, I guess, PR yourself to people, and whether or not that was really you just trying to kind of fill a weakness, a deficiency in you with empty words, you know, or was that actually the truth? Because, you know, I've definitely done this in the past, and I've had many times people do this, you know, to me in the past, and it's like, well, people tend to puff up their chest for shit they're not actually good at, to put on a facade that they're actually good at it. So don't buy into that. And it's like, don't think someone is that when they constantly, like, when you constantly feel like they're trying to convince you of something. Like, if anything, what they're trying to convince you of is something that they're not good at. Whereas what they are actually good at, or what you are, or what I am really good at, is something you would take for granted. So to give you another example, like when I was really young, back in school, I always excelled in math. And I remember one time I did so good on a math test. Like, the maximum score was 100, but I scored 108 because I did so spectacular on the test, right? And everyone was like, oh my god, that's so good. But then, like, to me, I was like, I don't give a shit. It's like, this feels so, like, it's blown out of proportion. It's like, yeah, great. Maybe I'm very logical, I'm very good at math. Like, my TI is very good, right? But I don't give a shit. You know, it's like, I want to be good at the other things that other people are good at. And it's like, not only do you not appreciate what you're good at, you almost, or even take it for granted. It's like you're condemning it because you're like, well, yeah, of course, this is so boring. It's like, you know, white rice or white bread isn't interesting. It's like what you put on the rice or what you put on the bread is interesting, right? But, you know, at the end of the day, like, the rice and the bread is a staple, and it has great merit by itself. So to condemn it or to, you know, not appreciate it, I feel like would be a mistake. So I guess, like, two key takeaways from this video is, one, to not buy the bullshit, you know, of people kind of trying to convince them that they're something, or don't buy into your own bullshit if you're trying to convince someone else that you're something that you're necessarily not. Like, just basically don't peacock, you know. Try and be as much in your truth as much as you can. Like, if you're not good at something, there's no need for you to, like, peacock about it. But at the same time, I think if you're bad at something and then you get really good at it through practice, I think it's very much a good thing for you to share. So another example, I'm just all over the place today. A guy called Eckhart Tolle, you know, he wrote a book called The Power of Now, and that talks about being present. And people identify him as an INFJ, which means his fourth function, which is his inferior function, is extroverted sensing. Basically, what that means is he has a hard time being in the physical moment and being present. So his whole kind of thesis of how he can balance his life and be in touch with life is to be present. So then he had this whole, you know, he had this whole book about being present. And, like, he doesn't write a book about doing what he's naturally good at, but he writes a book about something he was really bad at, and he had to work on it and get really good at. So I think that's really cool if you want to share that. But boasting about it or peacocking about it as a way to kind of cover up your own insecurities will only hurt you in the long run. And the second takeaway is to notice what you're actually good at and to not take it for granted, and very much less so condemn it. And use that. I feel like what you're good at is like you want to use that to strengthen other aspects of you that you're weak at the very least, right? And don't be a peacock. Be truthful.